you doing, everybody? My name is Brain Smasher. You knew that, and you probably know how good this video is going to be. But actually, you maybe don't. Because I got a really good one for you today. I got a really good video. And we're going to talk about the 20 albums that got me into black metal. You all know I love pontificating about black metal. You all know I love talking about the old days of black metal. So here it is. I don't think there's any more hedonistic way to indulge in the olden days of black metal. Here I have a pile of pretty much the best, in my opinion, black metal albums that there are. So a couple of videos ago or so, my buddy Eli did 20 albums that got me into death metal. A lot of people were doing that, and I just thought, you know, okay, I'll do that. Death metal's not my main thing, but black metal is really where it fucking hit home for me from day one, and still to this day it does. We'll probably get interrupted by the cat for a minute, but that's alright. But so, these are by no means the greatest black metal albums ever made, but in my opinion, I feel like the ones that you loved first are the ones you still cherish the most, and those really carve your taste palette for what you wind up expecting out of an album going forward. So it was kind of hard to pick. There's some where there's like a multiple albums from the same artist. I wanted to not do that, but I had a hard time picking outside of that expectation. So there's a couple that fall into that category, but so let's just get into it, I guess. These are in no order whatsoever at all. So the first one I picked out is here, Hivis Licitaros by Burzum. Not the first Burzum that I heard. It was Philosophem, but a lot different from Philosophem, and a lot different from so many other records that I had heard at that time. You know, there's this slow, kind of churning, atmospheric sort of black metal was really unique for its time, and to have such a strong symphonic, like, synth element going on was really something that enchanted me. And just the vocals on this are just absolutely gut-wrenching. I was just enthralled and hooked from the first second I heard this. I had friends who already had, you know, most of this stuff already, and I would just, can I please borrow your Burzum albums? And, you know, I would just take them home and just, oh my god, this is great. So Hivis Licitaros was definitely one of those. Next, this is actually what we're listening to. Algae On, Vox Clementis. Now this might be probably the most, I guess, awkward choice for this, but check this album out if you have any hesitations, man. This is a really fucking good EP. It's only 4 songs, sadly, but it came out after their debut, and they improved a whole shitload. This is so fucking good. Peter Tägtgren, my buddy, plays drums on this and produced it. Great melodic Swedish black metal. Something about like the delay on the vocals on this, just so great. And there's just such a sweetness to the melodies. It's definitely very Swedish, but there's just something so appealing and sweet about those just howling leads going over the chunky guitar riffs. I think it's a really unique band and album. I wish they would have done something that topped this, but they never did. Vox Clementis by Algae On. By the way, all this stuff will be linked down below because I love you. Next is going to be Cradle of Filth, Vampire, Dark Fairy Tales in Palestine. This had some reworked songs from the first record, and it definitely foreshadowed what they would be doing in Dusk in Her Embrace. Dusk in Her Embrace was my favorite album of 1997, but this was right there behind it, and I used to just go between this and Dusk in Her Embrace back and forth. Beautiful production on this, and there's just something about the vampiric and theatrical nature of this stuff, and really, like, what I always wish was that these songs were somehow worked into Dusk in Her Embrace. I don't know, there's a little bit of fluff and a little bit of filler on Dusk in Her Embrace. Killer album, but this is about Vampire, the EP. Love this stuff. There was just something just so chilling and vampiric about it. I never got over how interesting and theatrical both the artwork and the sound of their albums were. Just a really unique thing for its time. Like, look at this. Compare this to anything else going on in 1996, will you? Really, really strange. Next, I've got... Okay, so I could have put this in my death metal albums. And I don't know. I'm not going to say this is either a black metal album or a death metal album, but it definitely is an album that helped get me into black metal. At the Gates, Slaughter of the Soul. It's an album that birthed a terrible genre of music, an absolutely deplorable genre of tough guy hardcore bands that wanted to grow up and emulate the Swedish melodicism, but not a single one of them ever topped this album. I could pontificate all day about this album back and forth. I know it's kind of not the greatest end of the band, but it was there in 97 and it blew my fucking mind at that time. The songwriting on here is just water fucking tight. The aggression and the madness is just seething on this. Not one of my favorite album covers, especially by Necrolord. And I wish the band would have fucking stayed broken up after this album. But what can you do? Next is Begor's Opus 4. Just an amazing atmospheric black metal album from 95, I want to say. What can you say? It's just all over the place. It's got tons of interesting instrumentation. The songwriting is just labyrinthine and just keeps you glued to what's going on. Really forward-thinking for its time. It kind of took a lot of the influences that were coming out of Scandinavia, Norway, and Sweden, and put its own kind of spin on it. Maybe even a little bit of Cradle of Filth influence, I would say, on this. There's a lot of sort of like vampiric sort of leanings, I would say. But just really a unique thing. Took like all those things and just made it its own voice. And I don't think they ever did an album that sounded this good afterwards. Totally underrated album. You can't talk about this album enough. Opus 4 by Begor. It's fucking amazing. Next is The Black, Priest of Satan. This is on Necropolis. So this was like a one-off side project kind of thing. I don't really know how this came to be, but John Notefight from Dissection joined, and I don't know if it was like he was one of the founding members or if he joined later or something, but you can definitely hear his songwriting influence on this album. Just a stripped down, necrotic, I guess, sort of black metal record. And it's really interesting to hear John Notefight try and not be melodic, but he wounds up, like, he can't not be melodic in his riffing. So it's pretty interesting to hear, like, well-written songs when, in a way, I would say they were trying to not write very good songs and just, like, be completely hellish and, I don't know, forest-dwelling black metal creatures. But, yeah, this album is a totally underrated classic. I think this should be talked about in there with the Transylvanian Hungers, the In the Nightside Eclipses, and really everything else in this pile. Totally underrated classic, Priest of Satan by The Black. Also, did you know these guys got back together again in 2008, maybe 9, and did an album called Alongside Death. Really good album. There's a little fun fact for you. Again, I'm going to talk about Dawn. I can't stop harping on you guys about Dawn. This is Sorg på Svarte Vingerflow. Another EP. This is just kind of where I landed in the timeline of things. This just blew my mind. It's so incredibly melodic and dark. Just talk about a dark album. After I listened to the shit out of this, I wound up writing to Necropolis and saying, hey, I need all of your Dawn stuff, especially the first record. And they wrote back and said, all I've got is just the disc for the first album. So I said, I don't care, give it to me, $5. So they sent me that. Just killed me. To this day, that album just blows me away. But that was 97 or so, middle 97. This was more like 96, and I listened to the shit out of this in my buddy's car. Next, we've got Immortal, Blizzard Beasts. So this was really one of the defining albums that showed me what Norwegian's black metal was like, and only it took that aggression and it really kind of left behind the atmosphere. It's just a frenzied, chaotic, almost a mess. It's like teetering on the edge of just falling apart, and that's what I always loved about Immortal. That's why they're one of my favorite black metal bands. Is just they take it all the way to the point of where you think it's just gonna fall apart and blow up in your face and freeze you to death, almost. So I was really captivated by the whole like snowy, icy, demonic sort of ethos that they're going for, and this is the last great Immortal album. Next, so I'm not really a huge fan of this band, and I don't really listen to them all that often, but can't be understated. Mayhem's De Mysteriis Dom Satanis is a total genre-defining classic. It's got tons and tons of just dark, brooding, satanic atmosphere to it. Thundering fucking drums and really simplistic, carnal, evil riffing going on. And of course, Attila's amazing vocals were just awe-inspiring really at that time. And talk about just, for its time, there was really nothing like it. And I always thought, like, I was so surprised that they were able to pull off an album so amazing as this. I really think it has a lot to do with the production quality by Pitten, or Eric Hoonven. It really just all came together on this album, and then it all fall apart. Next, we've got Ole Miss Child's Born of the Flickering. I talked about this one a couple of videos ago because I got it in on vinyl. You know, not a band that most people talk about, and I think most people are more familiar with their later era stuff. But I guess arguably this is probably their last great release, in my opinion. It's got that Norwegian. God, I hate this album cover. This is so stupid. But yeah, as much as I love this album, it's something I don't really think about that often. It's just like, it's just there. Anyways, the album continued on and kind of further carved what I knew to be the Norwegian black metal stereotype. But it's got a little bit of that sort of vampiricism that I was talking about. But great songwriting. I really liked how it's just got like kind of a might to it. So that's Ole Miss Child, Born of the Flickering. Next is Immortal's Battles in the North. Yeah, you knew this was going to be in my list. Probably my favorite black metal record of all time. Just insane, dissonant, yet also sort of melodic riffing. Really interesting sort of guitar work going on by Demonaz. And again, it pushes the aggression all the way to the brink of almost self-destructing or imploding in on itself, or just blasting ice all over your face in a way. And that's just where Immortal thrives. It's just on that threshold of almost falling apart. This album I just fucking love everything about it. It's got some sort of like cheesy sort of Bathory tribute elements to it. The Battles in the North, man. If you haven't heard it, I don't know, I'm sorry. Next, we've got Ulver's Bertha. So I remember very distinctly the moment I first heard this album, and it wasn't the black metal song that I heard. It was the acoustic song, track 5. I was on my way to Milwaukee Metal Fest, and I realized I didn't have any music in my car for the drive to Milwaukee, and my buddy lent me a tape, and it was like a mixtape. It had like tons of different black metal songs on it, but it was interspersed with the acoustic song from Ole Miss Child, and it just captivated me how repetitive it was and how just droning and personal it seemed at the time for me. It was like nothing else I had heard at that time for sure, and definitely had so little to do with black metal. But once I was able to get in touch with my friend again, I was like, what was that song? He's like, oh, okay, it was Ole Miss Child. Put this on, and wow, just talk about, again, that Norwegian sound, those just fleeting harmonies and triumphant melodicism going on here, and talk about a lot of minimalism going on here too. Brilliant debut for a bunch of 16 and 17 year olds from Norway. Next, you probably knew this was going to be in here. Transylvanian Hunger by Darkthrone. Arguably one of the best black metal records ever recorded. I didn't get this one until I was kind of late in the game, actually, getting this album, getting a copy of this album anyways. And in a way, I think I kind of held off on listening to it until I was able to get my hands on it. I'd kind of been through all this stuff, and I was like, okay, let's see what's up with this Darkthrone band. I ordered it. I think I ordered it at the record store. Maybe they had it in stock, actually. Can you imagine a record store back in '97 having this in stock? I'm pretty sure Relics Records had this in without me ordering it. But yeah, what can you say about Transylvanian Hunger? It's perfect in every fucking way. It's just got that totally muffled guitar sound to it. They just had such a streak of great albums around that time. Actually, I did a pretty good job, I think, of writing a review of this album. I'll put a link down below. Tell you all my thoughts on it. But talk about a fucking just perfect black metal masterpiece. You can't go wrong with this album. Next, so this was quite a strange album to hear back in that time. Arcturus, Asperheim Symphonia. These guys were busy doing Mayhem and Over, and they wound up doing something like this. What a strange debut to do. Again, Norwegian black metal, but it just has such a strange sort of God, what's the word I want to say? But it just has sort of its own sort of classiness to it. It just stands up high and above all the other Norwegian black metal records. It just has such an interesting style to it. I don't really get anything like visually when I listen to this album. I don't think of like Norwegian mountains or Norwegian forests or any woods of that kind of thing. It just, I guess in a way, it just kind of stands on its own as a really unique album. And all the albums they did after this are really strange and unique, but this one being so close to the chest, I guess, as far as being an early Norwegian black metal record, just speaks to how unique this band always was back then. I picked the same album twice. Okay, so a little bit different. We've got Marduk, Heaven Shall Burn. This for me was like the advent of really aggressive sort of stuff, just straight out satanic aggression. And as far as I'm concerned, Marduk never topped this album. The songwriting is just fucking awesome. This, I think, was where they first really tried out their hyperspeed sort of style they became known for. And this album is just fucking flawless as far as I'm concerned. Cover art by Alf Svensson from At the Gates and Oxy Plagats. Love this album to death, man. Next is Cradle of Filth, Dusk in Her Embrace. I talked about it a minute. It's got that vampiricism, but it really all just came together for me. This is just such a bombastic and theatrical take on metal, taking a lot of the 80s influences and making it modern for its time in 96. Yeah, what a great album. Dusk in Her Embrace by Cradle of Filth. Next, definitely some of the probably my top three here as we wind down. Dissection, Storm of the Lightsbane. This, for the longest time, it came across to me as a black metal record, but I guess it can be argued that it really is technically a death metal album. But it's not really anything like any other death metal band. So what intrigued me so much about Dissection, and still does to this day, is the perfect melodic songwriting going on, the amazing intricate drum work going on by Ole Miss. It's the sing-along vocals. Everything just came together on this album so perfectly. Dan Swano's production is just amazing. What a perfect album. This is probably, if you ever wondered, the album that I've listened to the most in my lifetime. If I put this on in the car, there's a good chance we're going to be getting in an accident, because I'll be air drumming, air guitaring, pounding my fist on the steering wheel, and just flying all over the fucking car. And this is probably another album that might do that. Anthems to the Welkin at Dusk by Emperor. This has so many great elements. You can barely even see this. I was always kind of let down by this album cover, but anyways, it's a perfect Norwegian black metal album. But what really hit home for me was how amazingly orchestrated everything was. It was like a black metal band was playing a classical orchestra, and it's just furious and brilliant, memorable. I just love the guitar work and the drumming and the vocals. Everything just came together so well in this album. And just talk about, I don't know, brilliant songwriting. I've always thought, like, what if I could take this and set down someone who's like a classically trained musician and say, listen to the composition on this. Is this not brilliant, or am I just a stupid metalhead? Next and last, we've got Burzum's Philosophem. Probably his last great record. Hopefully his last great record. I try not to talk about Burzum too often on this channel because the guy's a fucking douchebag. But when I set this album down, I think I talked about the first time I ever put this album on a couple of videos ago. But a friend of mine was a foreign exchange student in Germany, and he had gone over there in 96, and he came back in 97, and he had a stack of metal CDs he had picked up in Germany, and this is one of them. So he came back, and while he was catching up with my buddy, and I didn't really know him that well, so I didn't care if, I kind of ducked out and didn't hang out while he caught up with my friend. I just grabbed those CDs, and they all looked crazy to me, and this was the first one I put on. I smoked a joint, sat in the basement, I listened to Philosophem in its entirety from start to finish. It's kind of weird that it's everybody thinks of it as a genre-defining black metal record, but half of it is like ambient noise. But yeah, I love this album to death. You've all heard it, you all know it, it's great. Here it is. So there you have it. I hope that wasn't too long. That's my 20 albums that got me into black metal back in the day. Let me know what your list is. Let me know what you think of the albums that I picked. And definitely, if you haven't heard any of these, you've got some homework to do, buddy. See you later.